Welcome to the Sunrise Road, a podcast with conversations that connect and weave hope in the fabric of our shared lives. Me, I'm the Reverend Thomas Stummermuth.
And I'm Melodie Jones-Poynton, and we are so happy that you are listening to our podcast. We are really excited to have as our guest today, Michaella Kumke. She is the CEO and director of the Food Bank of Lincoln, which actually services Southeast Nebraska as well. She's been a partner in mission with us at Eastridge Presbyterian Church for more years than Michaella and Thomas and I have been around. And I have in front of me the press release that says that it was 2021. It was 3 years ago that you took this on. And I think it was probably 3 years ago when we last caught up with you. And there was like a pandemic and the midst of a move and a whole lot of other things that the food bank changes the food bank was experiencing. So it's nice to catch up with you today.
It's always good to be in your company. And thanks for the invitation to come back.
So first off, what are you excited about at the Food Bank of Lincoln? Let's just catch up for a few minutes and think about maybe all those things that have happened in the last 3.5 years and what's really exciting.
We're into, the autumn season officially now. And in September, we celebrated Hunger Action Month, which is a time when we come together to really elevate awareness about the issue of food insecurity. And so now being on the other side of that, and headed to the holiday season, what we're really looking at is, kids are in the back to school schedule. So families are in kind of that routine now. And some of our seasonal programs like Hometown Fresh and Lincoln Fresh are beginning to wind down. They're still going on, but starting to wind down. And now we'll look at, what is ahead. And what I say about our work is, turns out people got to eat and they eat every single day. The holiday season tends to bring extra awareness to hunger. But every day our team is working hard to care for our neighbors. And so there's not a lot of slowdown, but you all know that pretty well in your line of work as well.
Mm. Absolutely. I do want to make a little step back first. I think most people around here will know your work and will know the Food Bank of Lincoln very well, but there may be listeners here who are not familiar, and maybe the food bank is just this ominous organization somehow, somewhere in our community. And so maybe you can give us a little bit a very Eli 5, explain it like a 5. What is the food bank? What does the food bank do? What's the role of the food bank in our community?
The Food Bank of Lincoln, as Melodie said, we serve 16 counties in Southeast Nebraska, and there are about 9,200 square miles in our service area. We know we're one of 200 member Feeding America member food banks. So across the country and Puerto Rico, think of the network serving neighbors across this country, and there are 200 immediate members, and then we work in partnership with more than 60,000 food pantries and programs to serve the United States and Puerto Rico. And then you whittle it down to here in Nebraska. We are one of 2 Feeding America member organizations. So Food Bank of Lincoln and Food Bank for the Heartland, which is located in Omaha. And together we serve all 93 counties in the state of Nebraska. And we know, according to the most recent data from Feeding America, that 1 in 7 of our neighbors here in the state and in Southeast Nebraska are food insecure. And that includes 1 in 5 children, 18 years and younger. And so the Food Bank of Lincoln, we really function in a way that that serves as a hub for getting food into and then right back out to our communities. So a central hub, and we are also a frontline supporter. We host a food distribution, a mobile food distribution on the first and third Fridays from our parking lot. And a week ago, somebody had asked me, how are things at the food bank? And it seemed like maybe a little bit of activity had slowed down a little bit. But then Monday morning, meeting with our staff, and we see the numbers kind of creeping back up. So what do? We work with great agency partners like Eastridge Pantry. Thank you all so very much for that. But 45 different other nonprofit agencies that multiply to about 80 different sites to get food into neighbors' hands. We, of course, have our child hunger programs. And this year, the backpack program we celebrate our 20th anniversary of that program being active. We also work with federal programs like SNAP, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. We have outreach coordinators on our team that help folks apply and recertify. And then we also, like I said, host mobile food distributions. We are in 29 different communities every month here in Southeast Nebraska, providing frontline food and meal connection services. So that's a little bit of our organization.
I thank you so much for sharing some of those statistics, because one of the things that I was going to ask is yesterday, as I was leaving church in the afternoon, in our food pantry, if anybody's listening and they don't know, our food pantry is actually on our church property, but it's a community food pantry. So we have member partners that work with us to make that happen. It is run mostly with leadership from Eastridge Presbyterian Church, but not exclusively. And so it is all run entirely by nobody gets paid to work at our food pantry. But as I was leaving, the two women who had been serving that day said that they had more cars than usual, and that they had noticed that there were several of our clients that might be living out of their cars. And this is of great concern to me and to us, because really what we would like is to see the need go down and not increase. So my question was going to be, is that what you're seeing, and where are you seeing it? Is that mostly in cities, mostly in smaller communities in Nebraska? Where are you seeing that?
I would say it's pretty evenly spread. So in our rural service area, we tend to see more senior hunger. And because the predominant population in a lot of our small town service area are older adults and senior citizens, and they want to continue to live in their town, right? In their small town, in their community. It's not exclusively that population, but predominantly. And then, here more in Lincoln, Lancaster, immediate surrounding area, we see a lot of families kind of struggling to make ends meet. And certainly with things like the housing and homelessness crisis that we're experiencing. And I was talking to a good friend, a former food bank coworker who now leads another organization. And she said, I'm not a dramatic person, but I really do feel it's appropriate to call it a crisis. And so to your point, we are seeing more individuals who can't afford to stay in a rental or a home environment. And that stability is so incredibly important. And so, yeah, we're seeing it. We're feeling and hearing from our partners that they're seeing some of this as well. And so it just remains more important than ever to continue to band together and to see these neighbors.
Thanks for sharing that. And we participate with the Leffler Food Market and are excited to be able to do that. You mentioned the backpack program is 20 years. Like, how amazing! What a great celebration that is. And sometimes it feels like we are, we have those institutions and that ability to reach out to families with children. and teenagers. But when it gets to other demographics, it might be harder to see the senior who is going hungry, and how do you get to them? So thanks for mentioning that.
You mentioned a cue there with to see our neighbors that we maybe not see or don't pay attention seeing. One theme that we wanna kind of tackle this fall is kind of like what kind of our misconceptions are about hunger in our community. And I'm curious what you could share with us a little bit in that regard, and also kind of like what you really wish people knew about food insecure, the experience of being food insecure in our community.
You bet. So a few things come to mind. When I think about how do we see and serve our neighbors facing hunger and food insecurity, I think immediately about individuals who I have met through programs, or my colleagues and our volunteer base has met and shared those experiences. I think about the most extreme situations that I think some people tend to immediately go to. And the story that comes to mind is one of this gentleman who he goes by Jack or Jay, and he visits the food bank with some frequency. And when I think about Jack, I just remember my very first conversation with him. He came in to get what we call welcome bags right here from the food bank, and heard a little bit of his story. And what I remember is, when I think of Jack, these crystal clear, beautiful blue eyes, and just really seeing the depth, right, of this person. And on the surface, when most people just quickly look at Jack, they will see a disheveled man who has a grown out, scraggly beard, and clothes that don't quite fit him. And he's got his backpack, and maybe perhaps a little intimidating if you're not, if you're not around this type of neighbor very frequently. But to hear Jack's story and to understand who Jack as a little boy, he has shared with me, he grew up in an abusive household where it was not safe for him to be. And, then when he went to school, he got bullied in school. And at a relatively young age, before he finished high school, he ran away, and he lived a life that he would tell you today he kind of regrets getting involved in some of the things that he did. But Jack owns all of that today. He knows that those weren't his best decisions. But he is still battling some of those same demons. And when he comes to the food bank, he is just so tender and respectful to me and to our staff. And, some days are better than others for him. But what I keep telling myself is just look at Jack's eyes, and remember that there is love and goodness and struggle. And maybe Jack doesn't get to have a shower every day like I get to have, and access to a razor, but I'll tell you, he is a neighbor, and he has such a good heart, and has only ever been kind to me and to our group. And Jack needs food. Jack just needs food. Mm-hmm. And I don't need to know all of Jack's story to know he needs food. I don't need to know any of his story, to realize that here he is showing up at the door and he needs food and we have the resources. So we will meet Jack where he is. I also think about the neighbors who, when in my work, I get to speak to a lot of groups, right? And I remember in the past year or two being at a different congregation, making a presentation, and then afterward meeting with some of the congregants, and a woman in her Sunday best came up to me and she said, "I just want to tell you, thank you so much for that Lincoln Fresh program. I could not afford produce, but I stopped by that stop in her neighborhood and get fresh produce." And she said, "It is a godsend for me." And I was taken aback because my own bias and stereotype, I did not expect somebody in that environment to be so candid. And that's a vulnerable thing, but she wanted me to know how important these programs are. And she said, I know I probably don't look like your typical individual. And that caught me too, because she doesn't look that different, really. It's just that we were at church and I didn't expect it for some reason, but I am constantly reminded 1 in 7 of our neighbors, including 1 in 5 kids, hunger does not care what your story is. It doesn't care that you've worked really hard your entire life and now you're at an age where you need Social Security and you're on a fixed income and your medical challenges are plenty and you can come to church in your Sunday best, but still need a little assistance for food. And then the other neighbor that I think, actually, I got a card in the mail last week. Could I read this?
Yeah.
To you? This is,
Sure.
It says, Dear Lincoln Food Bank, we don't look like we need help from the food bank. We have an okay house, an okay car, and we're clothed decently. But recently a medical event wiped out our savings, took all our money that wasn't going to bills, and forced us to choose between food and medicine. Our credit card was maxed out after a month. We got food from a food bank distribution. It kept us fed during a really dark and trying time. We work really hard and have good jobs, but it only took 1 month and one event to decimate our finances to the point we couldn't buy food. We never felt judged at the food distribution, even though we felt ashamed. We are getting back on our feet as a family, but we wanted to say thank you. What you do matters, and it is saving families. Love, a Lincoln mama. Yeah, and I just think, that really says it, right? What does hunger look like? What do our neighbors look like? It looks like you and me, or people who we know who are probably struggling, but they do a really good job of hiding it, right? The line, of course, that sticks with me is, we never felt judged, even though we felt ashamed. And I would just say, if anybody, listening to the podcast has ever been in that position or is currently in the position of needing food, please don't feel ashamed. We hope you always feel welcome and loved and seen. But I hope you don't feel ashamed. It's never really proven to be a valuable emotion to get us moving forward. But it's still an important emotion. So that was a really long answer, but I hope that gives you perspective.
No, it does give perspective, and I think, yeah, a Lincoln mama, that could be me. A Lincoln papa could be Thomas. It could be any of us. It could be a medical event, or I had heard somewhere about the rates of poverty and hunger amongst college students. Well, that's like that's a thing. And we don't often think about that as a thing, but it is a thing. And so it's kind of this universal, like everybody gets hungry. One of the things that I want to make sure we talk about is that we've changed some of the ways that we're getting food. And you and I had a conversation a little bit earlier this year about this, because we are now getting food from local business partners, and we go and pick up that food. And so we actually have more produce than we've ever had before, and we have more variety. And only want to mention that because we think that's a great thing.
Yeah.
I have a lot of dietary issues, and so when I was first diagnosed with my dietary issues, I was like, well, where would I go? Where could I go? And that has really opened a door at our pantry that anybody could come, even if you had to be dairy free or gluten free or nut free. And we've got lots of options now. But we've also noticed that there's a lot more food from our partners. That there's, it seems like prices keep getting higher for those able to go into stores and buy food. That means we can buy less food, which means they have more food to share with others. Is that something that you're seeing? Is that working out, you think, to have pantries and organizations have those relationships with the local businesses?
Yes. So first of all, thank you for being, again, such a strong partner. And that was a significant change in how we operated. And so we think it's working, and I hope, that you still feel that it is a benefit that way to have that. It gets the food out faster, really, in our view, right? And so we've seen a lot of changes, both like our retail partners, and we call that program Retail Rescue. During the pandemic, retailers were getting smarter with their food buying, and so really dialing in on their buying, which dropped significantly the amount of donations that ended up coming through our programs. But as you just pointed out, there's another pinch that's happening, basic economy. And so that is kind of putting more food and especially fresh produce back into the donating stream. We are seeing it in different areas. And so far, that was a big adjustment when it first started, that direct pickup from partners. And so I think there was a lot of like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And then we said, we'll walk with you. We're not just going to dump it on you and go. We'll walk alongside you in this process. And now we're starting to hear that it is a benefit to those partners to be able to do that frontline service and to see quickly what's coming. Like you're saying, you're getting more of that to kind of figure out and stock your own shelves in a way that suits the neighbors who you see and serve. And so, and that speaks to the nature of all of it. I mean, this is messy work, and we don't try to pretend otherwise. All of the circumstances that bring people to our organization and to our partner organizations, those are messy situations. Food is just a messy industry in and of itself, but none of it happens without the strong partnerships. So, we hope ultimately we're all looking at that neighbor coming through our doors and thinking of that. How do we serve with dignity? How do we serve quickly? And how do we serve with dignity and compassion?
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I certainly don't necessarily want to speak on behalf of those who are working in the pantry. But from my perspective, I think that it has given us a broader variety. And so when we first started, and when I first arrived here 9 or 10 years ago, we went in to see your predecessor, and I learned all about what food insecurity is and food instability, and how we're not trying to completely stock somebody's shelves, and we're also
right.
assuming that they have some way to open a can, like there's So we're trying to fill that gap. And I had just never thought about it, but those two things kind of happened together that, we saw more produce, which is fabulous because that's definitely a gap. And then also just the variety of things that we didn't have access to before. And you really only need like one or two options with a very specific food diet because the one or two people who need that are going to take it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know if I think it's working out. And yeah, I think it's working out.
I did want to pick up a word that you used earlier on that first of all, I really appreciate the stories that you shared with us and the way you helped us see our neighbors a little bit differently. You mentioned that sometimes, or maybe it's a cliche to some degree, people who experience food insecurity or hunger may at first glance look intimidating. And I would ask you if you could help us a little bit unravel that a little bit. How do we encounter someone where we feel intimidated? What does being a good neighbor look like?
Well, I am not an expert, Thomas, but I am happy to just share kind of my experience, my perspective on this. One of our core values is education, and I'm going to go ahead and name a Lynn if that's okay. My former colleague and admired fellow executive director. She leads Matt Talbot Kitchen and Outreach now. She's taught me a lot, and just think about the education that happens if you've been unhoused or if you're in transition, if you are, trying to get back on your feet and free yourself from addiction. Your life probably isn't a storybook, and just to see people, the intimidation, I think, truthfully, it happens in our minds for so many of us, because perhaps we've watched too much TV growing up as kids or, what have you, but to approach an individual, I always say, especially with women, when I think about talking to my nieces, like, one, trust your gut. Your gut instinct is very important. But also hear your heart and hear your head. Trust your gut and hear your heart and hear your head. And what I mean is, there is a great deal of mental illness. We know that that's another crisis that we're facing. And so most individuals they're facing their own battles. And some of that just means, like, on the street, look people in the eye. I mean, it's such a simple act, to see another, to look them in the eyes, to see them, and to wish somebody a good day. It's not a put down to say, I hope today's going well for you. You and I would say that encountering each other on the street, right? This, just be human. But there may be circumstances where you need to, be a little more attentive to the surroundings and all those things. But in general, in the daylight, on the street, welcome, like, just acknowledging somebody's presence can be a big deal. I don't know, Thomas, I don't know if that really answers what you're asking. I just think about any one of us. I mean, the internal mind games that happen for people who have all the resources they need, as well as individuals who are feeling under-resourced, just to have somebody acknowledge your existence. can lighten the load a little bit.
As you were talking, what I was thinking is, and listening to you is, in order to share that dignity and that comes from human connection and like seeing someone else of value and acknowledging their presence, whether it's when you and I saw each other today, it was like, oh, hi, how are you? Like, it's been a while since I've talked to you and what's going on. And, sort of those questions. And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, but Michaella, if you're hungry, you can't think. Like, how do you answer, like how do you answer those questions? How are you today? Like, I'm hungry and I can't think today because I'm really hungry. And just how profound of these basic needs that we're talking about right now, being thirsty, being hungry, being housed, all, these things, like they really are crucial for being able to answer that question, how are you? Which is just a really profound need. That's all I'm saying, is that it's such a profound place to be, to feel hungry.
I agree completely, and I appreciate that added perspective, because when you ask those questions, it's the ask it to understand and to hear the response, not just to satisfy, oh, I've checked that box of asking how you're doing, right? And understand you might get that answer. Well, I'm really hungry today. Or I'm really struggling. And so it's that act of empathy and compassion of, okay, that might stop you in your tracks. Now what? And I think that's the call for every single one of us. And it's not easy. Again, this is messy work. This humanity, this work of humanity, it's really messy.
It's so messy.
Yeah. And the messy things are worth it, right? We see that, feel that, and know that time and time again. You and I were talking to Melodie. You said, we want to make sure that we don't pity, but that we serve. And I love that. That is exactly the sentiment and mentality. Asking for help in the first place is a challenging thing. And we're not saviors here. I believe that responsibility belongs to a much higher power than any of us and all of us combined, right? We're here to serve. We're here to see and support. So, yeah.
Well, thank you so much for spending time with us today. And just to name and claim once again that when you stepped into this role of president and CEO of the food bank, there was a lot of change going on and a lot of challenges to be met and a lot of innovation that needed to happen. And in my opinion, you've just done an excellent job. And I'm so thankful for your partnership and seeing the work that that this community is doing at the food bank here and all over Southeast Nebraska. I just really appreciate you.
Well, right back at you. And I mean that sincerely, because none of it happens, like I said earlier, without a really good team, the determination and the compassion, and then partners and volunteers and the community who's willing to think differently and to act compassionately. These aren't just bumper stickers and t-shirts, right? These are really ways to live. So thank you all for the daily work that you do of service, the partnership, and again, for the invitation. I appreciate it.